Kava. Kava or Kava piper methysticum, Latin pepper and Latinized Greek intoxicating, is a crop of the Pacific Islands. The name kava is from Tongan and Marquesan, meaning bitter. Other names for kava include ʻawa Hawaiʻi, ʻava Samoa, yaqona or yagona Fiji, seka Pohnpei, Kosrae, and malok or malogu parts of Vanuatu. Kava is consumed for its sedating effects throughout the Pacific Ocean cultures of Polynesia, including Hawaiʻi, Vanuatu, Melanesia, and some parts of Micronesia, such as Pohnpei and Kosrae. The root of the plant is used to produce a drink with sedative, anesthetic, and euphoriant properties. Its active ingredients are called kavalactones. A systematic review done by the British nonprofit Cochrane concluded it was likely to be more effective than placebo at treating short-term anxiety. Moderate consumption of kava in its traditional form, i.e. as a water-based suspension of kava roots, has been deemed to present an acceptably low level of health risk by the World Health Organization. However, consumption of kava extracts produced with organic solvents or excessive amounts of poor-quality kava products may be linked to an increased risk of adverse health outcomes, including potential liver injury. History and names. 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 Names and names. 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 Names and names. Kava is conspecific with Piper witchmanii, indicating kava was domesticated from Piper witchmanii sin. Piper suballatum. Kava originated in either New Guinea or Vanuatu by seafarers. It was spread by the Austronesian Lepida culture after contact eastward into the rest of Polynesia. It is endemic to Oceania and is not found in other Austronesian groups. Kava reached Hawaiʻi, but it is absent in New Zealand where it cannot grow. Consumption of kava is also believed to be the reason why betel chewing, ubiquitous elsewhere, was lost for Austronesians in Oceania. According to Lynch 2002, the reconstructed Proto-Polynesian term for the plant, *kava, was derived from the Proto-Oceanic term *kawa, are in the sense of a bitter root or potent root used as fish poison. It may have been related to reconstructed *waka, are in Proto-Oceanic and Proto-Malayo-Polynesian via metathesis. It originally referred to zingiber zorumbit, which was used to make a similar mildly psychoactive bitter drink in Austronesian rituals. Cognates for *kava include Pohnpei and sakau, Tongan, Niu Rapa Nui, Tuamatuan, and Rarotongan kava, Samoan and Marquesan ʻava, and Hawaiian ʻawa. In some languages, most notably Maori kawa, the cognates have come to mean bitter, sour, or acrid to the taste. In the Cook Islands, the reduplicated forms of kaukaua or kava are also applied to the unrelated members of the genus Pittosporum. In other languages, such as Futunan, compound terms like kavalactones refer to other species belonging to the genus Piper. The reduplication of the base form is indicative of falsehood or likeness in the sense of false kava. In New Zealand, it was applied to the Kaukaua Piper excelsum, which is endemic to New Zealand and nearby Norfolk Island and Lord Howe Island. It was exploited by the Maori based on previous knowledge of the kava, as the latter could not survive in the colder climates of New Zealand. The Maori name for the plant, kaukaua, is derived from the same etymon as kava, but reduplicated. It is a sacred tree among the Maori people. It is seen as a symbol of death, corresponding to the Rangira brachyglottis repanda, which is the symbol of life. However, kaukaua has no psychoactive properties. Its connection to kava is based purely on similarity in appearance. Characteristics. Kava was historically grown only in the Pacific Islands of Hawaiʻi, Federated States of Micronesia, Vanuatu, Fiji, the Samoas, and Tonga. An inventory of P. methysticum distribution showed it was cultivated on numerous islands of Micronesia, Melanesia, Polynesia, and Hawaiʻi, whereas specimens of P. witchmanii were all from Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, and Vanuatu. The kava shrub thrives in loose, well-drained soils where plenty of air reaches the roots. It grows naturally where rainfall is plentiful, attaining over 78 inches 2,000 mm per year. Ideal growing conditions are 70-95 deg, F2135 deg C, and 70-100% relative humidity. Too much sunlight is harmful, especially in early growth, because kava is an understory crop. Kava cannot reproduce sexually. Female flowers are especially rare and do not produce fruit even when hand-pollinated. Its cultivation is entirely by propagation from stem cuttings. Traditionally, plants are harvested around 4 years of age, as older plants have higher concentrations of kavalactones. After reaching about 2 meters (6.6 ft) height, plants grow a wider stalk and additional stalks, but not much taller. The roots can reach a depth of 60 centimeters (2.0 ft). Cultivars. Kava consists of sterile cultivars cloned from its wild ancestor, Piper witchmaniae. Today it comprises hundreds of different cultivars grown across the Pacific. Each cultivar has not only different requirements for successful cultivation, but also displays unique characteristics both in terms of its appearance and in terms of its psychoactive properties. Noble and non-noble kava. Scholars make a distinction between the so-called noble and non-noble kava. The latter category comprises the so-called two-day or two-day kavas, medicinal kavas, and wild kava Piper witchmaniae, the ancestor of domesticated Piper methysticum. Traditionally, only noble kavas have been used for regular consumption due to their more favorable composition of kavalactones and other compounds that produce more pleasant effects and have lower potential for causing negative side effects, such as nausea or kava hangover. The perceived benefits of noble cultivars explain why only these cultivars were spread around the Pacific by Polynesian and Melanesian migrants, with presence of non-noble cultivars limited to the islands of Vanuatu from which they originated. More recently, it has been suggested that the widespread use of two-day cultivars in the manufacturing of several kava products might have been the key factor contributing to the rare reports of adverse reactions to kava observed among the Kunsu. Two-day varieties have traditionally not been grown in Hawaii and Fiji, but in recent years there have been reports of farmers attempting to grow ʻawa or Palissy non-noble cultivars in Hawaii and of imports of dry two-day kava into Fiji for further re-exporting. The two-day cultivars may be easier and cheaper to grow while it takes up to 5 years for noble kava to mature. Non-noble varieties can often be harvested just 1 year after being planted. The concerns about the adverse effects of non-noble varieties, produced by their undesirable composition of kavalactones and high concentrations of potentially harmful compounds flavocavins, which are not present in any significant concentration in the noble varieties, have led to legislation prohibiting exports from such countries as Vanuatu. Likewise, efforts have been made to educate the non-traditional customers about the difference between noble and non-noble varieties, and that non-noble varieties do not offer the same results as noble cultivars. In recent years, government regulatory bodies and non-profit NGO have been set up with the declared aim of monitoring kava quality, producing regular reports, certifying vendors selling proper, noble kava, and warning customers against products that may contain two-day varieties. Growing regions. In Vanuatu, exportation of kava is strictly regulated. Only cultivars classified as noble are allowed to be exported. Only the most desirable cultivars for everyday drinking are classified as noble to maintain quality control. In addition, their laws mandate that exported kava must be at least 5 years old and farmed organically. Their most popular noble cultivars are Borogu or Boringoru from Pentecost Island, Melamilo from ʻawa Island called Seas in the North Pentecost Island, and Palaraso kava from Espiritu Santo. In Vanuatu, two-day kava is reserved for special ceremonial occasions, and exporting it is not allowed. Kalaci is a popular two-day variety. In Hawaii, there are many other cultivars of Kava Hawaiian, ʻawa. Some of the most popular cultivars are Mahakea, Moai, Hiwa, and Neem. The Alii kings of pre-colonial Hawaii coveted the Moai variety, which had a strong cerebral effect due to a predominant amount of the kavalactone kavain. This sacred variety was so important to them that no one but royalty could ever experience it, lest they suffer an untimely death. The reverence for Hiwa in Old Hawaii is evident in this portion of a chant recorded by Nathaniel Bright Emerson and quoted by E.S. Craig Hill and Elizabeth Green Handy. This refers to the cup of sacramental ʻawa brewed from the strong, black ʻawa root ʻawa Hiwa, which was drunk sacramentally by the kumu Hila. Winter describes a Hila prayer for inspiration, which contains the line, He ike puawe Hiwa. Pucui and Elbert translated this as a knowledge from kava offerings. Winter explains that ʻawa, especially of the Hiwa variety, was offered to Hila deities in return for knowledge and inspiration. Relationship with Kawakawa. Kawakawa piper excelsum plant, known also as Maori kava, may be confused with kava. While the two plants look similar and have similar names, they are different but related species. Kawakawa is a small tree endemic to New Zealand, having importance to traditional medicine and Maori culture. As noted by the Kava Society of New Zealand, in all likelihood, the kava plant was known to the first settlers of Aotearoa, New Zealand. It is also possible that just like the Polynesian migrants that settled in Hawaii, the Maori explorers brought some kava with them. Unfortunately, most of New Zealand is simply too cold for growing kava. Further, in New Zealand, where the climate is too cold for kava, the Maori gave the name kawakawa to another Pipraceum excelsum in memory of the kava plants they undoubtedly brought with them and unsuccessfully attempted to cultivate. The Maori word kawa also means ceremonial protocol, recalling the stylized consumption of the drug typical of Polynesia. Kawakawa is commonly used in Maori traditional medicine for the treatment of skin infections, wounds, and cuts, and when prepared as a tea for stomach upsets and other minor illnesses. Composition. Fresh kava root contains on average 80% water. Dried root contains approximately 43% starch, 20% dietary fiber, 15% kavalactones, 12% water, 3.2% sugars, 3.6% protein, and 3.2% minerals. In general, kavalactone content is greatest in the roots and decreases higher up the plant into the stems and leaves. Relative concentrations of 15%, 10%, and 5% have been observed in the root, stump, and basal stems, respectively. The relative content of kavalactones depends not only on plant segment, but also on the kava plant varieties, plant maturity, geographic location, and time of harvest. The kavalactones present are kavain, demethoxyangin, and yanganin, which are higher in the roots than in the stems and leaves, with dihydrocavane, methysticin, and dihydrophysticin also present. The mature roots of the kava plant are harvested after a minimum of 4 years, at least 5 years ideally for peak kavalactone content. Most kava plants produce around 50 kg 110 lb of root when they are harvested. Kava root is classified into two categories, crown root or chips and lateral root. Crown roots are the large diameter pieces that look like 1.5 to 5 inches 38 to 127 mm diameter wooden poker chips. Most kava plants consist of approximately 80% crown root upon harvesting. Lateral roots are smaller diameter roots that look more like a typical root. A mature kava plant is about 20% lateral roots. Kava lateral roots have the highest content of kavalactones in the kava plant. Waka grade kava is made of lateral roots only. Pharmacology. Constituents. A total of 18 different kavalactones or cavapirones have been identified to date, at least 15 of which are active. However, 6 of them, including kavane, dihydrokavane, methysticin, dihydromethysticin, yanginin, and dysmethoxyanginin, have been determined to be responsible for about 96% of the plant's pharmacological activity. Some minor constituents, including 3-chalcones, flavicavane A, flavicavane B, and flavicavane C, have also been identified, as well as a toxic alkaloid not present in the consumable parts of the plant, pipermethystine. Alkaloids are present in the roots and leaves. Pharmacodynamics. The following pharmacological actions have been reported for kava and/or its major active constituents. Potentiation of GABA receptor activity by kavane, dihydrokavane, methysticin, dihydromphisticin, and yanginin. Inhibition of the uptake of norepinephrine by kavane and methysticin, and possibly also of dopamine by kavane and dysmethoxyanginin. Binding to the C-bone receptor by yanginin. Inhibition of voltage-gated sodium channels and voltage-gated calcium channels by kavane and methysticin. Monoamine oxidase B reversible inhibition by all 6 of the major kavalactones. Receptor binding assays with botanical extracts have revealed direct interactions of leaf extracts of kava which appear to be more active than root extracts with the GABA, i.e. main binding site of the GABA receptor, the D2 receptor, the M and D opioid receptors, and the HON and H2 receptors. Weak interaction with the 5H6 and 5H7 receptors and the benzodiazepine site of the GABA receptor was also observed. Potentiation of GABA receptor activity may underlie the anxiolytic effects of kava, while elevation of dopamine levels in the nucleus accumbens likely underlie the moderately psychotropic effects the plant can produce. Changes in the activity of 5-HT neurons could explain the sleep-inducing action, however. Failure of the GABA receptor inhibitor flumazenil to reverse the anxiolytic effects of kava in mice suggests that benzodiazepine-like effects are not contributing to the pharmacological profile of kava extracts. Heavy, long-term use of kava has been found to be free of association with reduced ability in saccade and cognitive tests, but has been associated with elevated liver enzymes. Detection. Recent usage of kava has been documented in forensic investigations by quantitation of kavane in blood specimens. The principal urinary metabolite, conjugated 4-OH kavane, is generally detectable for up to 48 hours. Preparations. Traditional preparation. Kava is consumed in various ways throughout the Pacific Ocean cultures of Polynesia, Vanuatu, Melanesia, and some parts of Micronesia and Australia. Traditionally, it is prepared by either chewing, grinding, or pounding the roots of the kava plant. Grinding is done by hand against a cone-shaped block of dead coral. The hand forms a mortar and the coral a pestle. The ground root/bark is combined with only a little water, as the fresh root releases moisture during grinding. Pounding is done in a large stone with a small log. The product is then added to cold water and consumed as quickly as possible. The extract is an emulsion of kavalactone droplets in starch and buttermilk. The taste is slightly pungent, while the distinctive aroma depends on whether it was prepared from dry or fresh plant, and on the variety. The color is gray to tan to opaque greenish. Kava prepared as described above is much more potent than processed kava. Chewing produces the strongest effect because it produces the finest particles. Fresh, undried kava produces a stronger beverage than dry kava. The strength also depends on the species and techniques of cultivation. In Vanuatu, a strong kava drink is normally followed by a hot meal or tea. The meal traditionally follows some time after the drink so the psychoactives are absorbed into the bloodstream quicker. Traditionally, no flavoring is added. In Papua New Guinea, the locals in Madang province refer to their kava as whaled cognac, wild cognac in English. Fijians commonly share a drink called grog made by pounding sun-dried kava root into a fine powder, straining and mixing it with cold water. Traditionally, grog is drunk from the shorn half shell of a coconut, called a bilo. Grog is very popular in Fiji, especially among young men, and often brings people together for storytelling and socializing. Drinking grog for a few hours brings a numbing and relaxing effect to the drinker. Grog also numbs the tongue, and grog drinking typically is followed by a chaser, or sweet or spicy snack to follow a bilo. Supplements and pharmaceutical preparations. Water extraction is the traditional method for preparation of the plant. Pharmaceutical and herbal supplement companies extract kavalactones from the kava plant using solvents such as supercritical carbon dioxide, acetone, and ethanol to produce pills standardized with between 30% and 90% kavalactones. Concerns. Numerous scholars and regulatory bodies have raised concerns over the safety profile of such products. One group of scholars say that organic solvents introduce compounds that may affect the liver into the standardized product. These compounds are not extracted by water and consequently largely absent from kava prepared with water. For instance, when compared with water extraction, organic solvents extract vastly larger amounts of flavocavanes, compounds associated with adverse reactions to kava that are present in very low concentrations in noble kava, but significant in non-noble. Also, chemical solvents used do not extract the same compounds as the natural water extracts in traditional use. The extraction process may exclude important modifying constituents soluble only in water. In particular, it has been noted that, unlike traditional water-based preparations, products obtained with the use of organic solvents do not contain glutathione, an important liver-protecting compound. Another group of researchers noted the extraction process aqueous vs. Acetone in the two types of preparations is responsible for the difference in toxicity as extraction of glutathione in addition to the kavalactones is important to provide protection against hepatotoxicity. It has also been argued that kavalactone extracts have often been made from low-quality plant material, including the toxic aerial parts of the plant, non-noble kava varieties, or plants affected by mold, which, in light of the chemical solvent's ability to extract far greater amounts of the potentially toxic compounds than water, makes them particularly problematic. In the context of these concerns, the World Health Organization advises against the consumption of ethanolic and acetonic kavalactone extracts and says that products should be developed from water-based suspensions of kava. The government of Australia prohibit the sales of such kavalactone extracts and only permit the sale of kava products in their natural form or produced with cold water. Kava culture. Kava is used for medicinal, religious, political, cultural, and social purposes throughout the Pacific. These cultures have a great respect for the plant and place a high importance on it. In Fiji, for example, a formal yaqona kava ceremony will often accompany important social, political, or religious functions, usually involving a ritual presentation of the bundled roots as a sevu gift and drinking of the yagona itself. Due to the importance of kava. Kava bars. With kava's increasing popularity, bars serving the plant in its liquid state are beginning to open up outside of the South Pacific. A 2010 review concluded that it's possible that ethanol combined with kava may be the cause of kava hepatotoxicity. While some bars have been committed to only serving the traditional forms and types of kava, other establishments have been accused of serving non-traditionally consumed non-noble kava varieties which are cheaper, but far more likely to cause unpleasant effects and adverse reactions, or of serving kava with other substances, including alcohol. Effects of consumption. The nature of effects will largely depend on the cultivar of the kava plant and the form of its consumption. Traditionally, only noble kava cultivars have been consumed as they are accepted as safe and produce desired effects. The specific effects of various noble kavas depend on various factors, such as the cultivar used and the related specific composition of kavalactones, age of the plant, and method of its consumption. However, it can be stated that in general noble kava produces a state of calmness, relaxation, and well-being without diminishing cognitive performance. Kava may produce an initial talkative period, followed by muscle relaxation, and eventual sleepiness. As noted in one of the earliest Western publications on kava 1886, a well-prepared kava potion drunk in small quantities produces only pleasant changes in behavior. It is therefore a slightly stimulating drink which helps relieve great fatigue. It relaxes the body after strenuous efforts, clarifies the mind, and sharpens the mental faculties. According to contemporary descriptions, kava seizes one's mind. This is not a literal seizure, but something does change in the processes by which information enters, is retrieved, or leads to actions as a result. Thinking is certainly affected by the kava experience, but not in the same ways as are found from caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, or marijuana. I would personally characterize the changes I experienced as going from lineal processing of information to a greater sense of being and contentment with being. Memory seemed to be enhanced, whereas restriction of data inputs was strongly desired, especially with regard to disturbances of light, movements, noise, and so on. Peace and quiet were very important to maintain the inner sense of serenity. My senses seemed to be unusually sharpened, so that even whispers seemed to be loud while loud noises were extremely unpleasant. When the mixture is not too strong, the subject attains a state of happy unconcern, well-being, and contentment, free of physical or psychological excitement. At the beginning, conversation comes in a gentle, easy flow, and hearing and sight are honed, becoming able to perceive subtle shades of sound and vision. Kava soothes temperaments. The drinker never becomes angry, unpleasant, quarrelsome, or noisy, as happens with alcohol. Both natives and whites consider kava as a means of easing moral discomfort. The drinker remains master of his conscience and reason. In the late afternoon, a large museum crew would retire en masse to one of the many kava bars. Kava, unlike traditional bars, which tend to become louder and more volatile as people drink, kava bars tend to get quieter and calmer as the evening fades to black, until practically the only sounds are the screech of the native fruit bat. Despite its psychoactive effects, kava is not considered to be physically addictive, and its use does not lead to dependency. Adverse drug interactions. Alprazolam semicomatose state. Research. A 2010 review concluded that it's possible that ethanol combined with kava may be the cause of kava hepatotoxicity. Toxicity, safety, and potential side effects. General observations. Effects on the liver. Other adverse reactions. Adverse reactions may result from the poor quality of kava raw material used in the manufacturing of various kava products. In addition to the potential for hepatotoxicity, adverse reactions from chronic use may include visual impairment, rashes or dermatitis, seizures, weight loss, and malnutrition, but there is only limited high-quality research on these possible effects. On the basis of research findings and long history of safe use across the South Pacific, experts recommend using water-based extractions of high-quality peeled rhizome and roots of the noble kava cultivars to minimize the potential of adverse reactions to chronic use. Potential interactions. Several adverse interactions with drugs have been documented, both prescription and non-prescription, including, but not limited to, anticonvulsants, alcohol, anxiolytics, CNS depressants, such as benzodiazepines, antipsychotics, levodopa, diuretics, and drugs metabolized by CY450 in the liver. A few notable potential drug interactions are, but are not limited to, alcohol. It has been reported that combined use of alcohol and kava extract can have additive sedative effects. Regarding cognitive function, kava has been shown to have additive cognitive impairments while taken with alcohol when compared to taking placebo and alcohol alone. Anxiolytics, CNS depressants such as benzodiazepines and barbiturates, kava may have potential additive CNS depressant effects such as sedation and anxiolytic effects with benzodiazepines and barbiturates. Dopamine agonist levodopa One of levodopa's chronic side effects that Parkinson's patients experience is the on-off phenomenon of motor fluctuations, where there will be periods of oscillations between on where the patient experiences symptomatic. When taking levodopa and kava together, it has been shown that there is an increased frequency of this on-off phenomenon. Kava dermopathy. Long-term and heavy kava consumption is associated with a reversible skin condition known as Kava dermopathy or kani in Fiji, characterized by dry and scaly skin covering the palms of the hands, soles of the feet, and back. The first symptom to appear usually is dry, peeling skin. Some Pacific Islanders deliberately consume large quantities of kava for several weeks in order to get the peeling effect, resulting in a layer of new skin. These effects appeared at consumption levels between 31 grams 1.1 oz to 440 grams 0.97 lb a week of kava powder. Despite numerous studies, the mechanism that causes Kava dermopathy is poorly understood, but may relate to interference with cholesterol metabolism. The condition is easily treatable with abstinence or lowering of kava intake, as the skin appears to be returning to its normal state within a couple of weeks of reduced or no kava use. Kava dermopathy should not be confused with rare instances of allergic reactions to kava that are usually characterized by itchy rash or puffy face. Research. Kava is under preliminary research for its potential psychoactive, primarily anxiolytic, sleep-inducing, and sleep-enhancing properties. Preliminary randomized controlled trials in anxiety disorders indicate a higher rate of improvement in anxiety symptoms after kava treatment relative to placebo. Traditional medicine. Over centuries, kava has been used in the traditional medicine of the South Pacific Islands for central nervous system and peripheral effects. As noted in one literature review, peripherally, kava is indicated in traditional Pacific medicine for urogenital conditions, gonorrhea infections, chronic cystitis, difficulty urinating, reproductive and women's health, gastrointestinal upsets, respiratory ailments, asthma, coughs, and tuberculosis, skin diseases and topical wounds, and regulation. Kava remains legal in most countries. Regulations often treat it as a food or dietary supplement. Australia. In Australia, the supply of kava is regulated through the National Code of Kava Management. Travelers to Australia are allowed to bring up to 4 kg of kava in their baggage, provided they are at least 18 years old and the kava is in root or dried form. Commercial import of larger quantities is allowed under license for medical or scientific purposes. These restrictions were introduced in 2007 after concern about abuse of kava in indigenous communities. Initially, the import limit was 2 kg per person. It was raised to 4 kg in December 2019, and a pilot program allowing for commercial importation was implemented on 1 December 2021. The Australian Therapeutic Goods Administration has recommended no more than 250 mg of kavalactones be taken in a 24-hour period. Kava possession is limited to 2 kg per adult in the Northern Territory. While it was banned in Western Australia previously in the 2000s, the Western Australian Health Department announced lifting of its ban in February 2017, bringing Western Australia into line with other states where it has always remained legal, albeit closely regulated. Europe. New Zealand. When used traditionally, kava is regulated as a food under the Food Standards Code. Kava can also be used as a herbal remedy. When used in this way, kava is currently regulated by the Dietary Supplements Regulations. Only traditionally consumed forms and parts of the kava plant, i.e. pure roots of the kava plant and water extractions prepared from these roots, can legally be sold as food or dietary supplements in New Zealand. The sale of never traditionally consumed above-ground parts of the plant, unlike the roots of the plant, the aerial parts contain very small amounts of kavalactones and instead contain a mildly toxic alkaloid, pipermethysticine, and non-water-based extract such as ʻawa Acetonic or ethanol extractions is prohibited for the purpose of human consumption, but can be sold as an ingredient. North America. In 2002, Health Canada issued an order prohibiting the sale of any product containing kava. While the restrictions on kava were lifted in 2012, Health Canada lists 5 kava ingredients as of 2017. In 2002, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration issued a consumer advisory: kava-containing dietary supplements may be associated with severe liver injury. No legal action was taken, and this advisory has since been archived. Vanuatu, Nuatu. The Pacific island state of Vanuatu has passed legislation to regulate the quality of its kava exports. Vanuatu prohibits the export or consumption of non-noble kava varieties or the parts of the plant that are unsuitable for consumption, such as leaves and stems.